All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. I could use some white lightning.
Yeah, I might
And
dominate the conversation today, partly because of
I,
subject matter and partly because Heath's been under the weather. So
I'm only here because you can't let the commies win. Wolverines.
that, and we need to get some content out for Scott will go crazy on us. But we're gonna do that in part two. If you want, if you have the energy after the first part.
Yeah.
I'll try to be brief. Mine's more conceptual on the fitness side, which is what I wanted to start with. I had uh, the privilege of training another trainer last week, so kind of helping this person see some things in real time from somebody who's been in the industry for a long time. And this is there are different kinds of trainers, and so from a conceptual side, I'm a good observer and I'm a good programmer, but that took a long time to develop that eye. And I started with a kind of a good eye for things anyways. And I followed my mentors around like a lost puppy for a couple years to develop my craft. So a lot of the concepts we go over here are from years of practice and learning. And we're trying to, as the name suggests, distill it down to something that somebody could pick up relatively quick. But from a programming standpoint, I started this with, there are different kinds of trainers. Some people are better motivators. Some people are better evaluators. Some people are better planners. If you don't have the skill set to be a great planner, but you understand exercise technique and you're great with motivating your clients, you can still be a great trainer and learn that part along the way, because there are lots of good programs out there. I have mine, and my son is going to start helping me code the website so we can get some of that up. So I have mine. Brett Contreras has great ones out there. Strong Curves is one of my favorite programs ever written.
Yeah.
If you want somebody who wants to be extremely strong and that's their main goal, you got Jim Wendler's 531. They're out there. Just find the one that meets your client's needs. And so your programming expertise need only extend to, my client needs this at this time. And then you can find the good ones out there to do that, and then coach them through the technique and motivate them along the way and make sure they're sticking with the habits. So that's a great starting place for new trainers. If you're a great planner and you want to make that part of your shtick, then learn that as you go. And over the course of the next few episodes, I want to kind of give pointers on how to get really good at that. The little kind of training session, I need to formalize this a little bit because it was a little bit all over the place. We probably could have accomplished the same amount of knowledge in half the time. And so now I'm trying to consolidate it down a little bit. But that's the first point I want to get across, because you don't have to be great at everything. Find the part you're best at and let the other greats fill in the blanks. Anything you want to add to that before I go into the first concept?
Well, just as kind of a preamble, we've talked before, and go back and find some of those episodes if you want, about how to recognize a good trainer, because before you can figure out what the strengths and weaknesses of a particular trainer are, you need to make sure you have a good one in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first thought, because most of my experiences with big box gyms was to roll my eyes and be sarcastic, because most of the trainers you find in a box gym are there because they like to go to the gym and they figured, hey, I might as well get paid and hit on chicks while I go to the gym. And that's how they get into personal training.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at
or the mentality of, I look good, I can help other people do it.
Yeah. And it's some extension of that, of, I'm good at working out. I like working out. I would be good at this. Okay, well, those two things don't necessarily, compute. You brought up Contreras, and I think he's kind of one of the funny ones, because he looks kind of dumpy, But then when you watch his videos and see the amount of weight he can pull, you realize he's not. But
well, and he's made a point to say, I just eat like I normally do all the time, but I do know how to do it the right way. I'm going to do it for 6 months to show you that I can do it. And he's gotten really cut.
Yeah.
I personally have been down to 7% body fat, which is almost getting down to dangerous levels, just to show I could. And I sit about between 10 and 15, depending on the Thanksgiving season or whatever. And that's where I feel good. So that's why I like to sit between there. I can feel, I can tell when I'm getting over 15 to 15, 16% because I start feeling kind of sluggish. But I can also tell when I'm getting under 10% because I feel almost, it's like an anxiety, like your body's panicking. So that's my comfort zone. Now I can change the set point, but I don't want to, because it's actually a nice, happy place. You look good and you feel good.
And unfortunately, that is the first, that's the first cue and clue to a trainer is most people go with what they see, which is, does this person look good? And you can really see that in the celebrity trainers that we kind of rail about, when we rant about The Biggest Loser and things like that. And that's a major component to their brand. And so a lot of people shop that way too. But the reason I brought up Brett Contreras is because you spend 3 minutes listening to him in one of his videos, and you very quickly discovered that the guy's an academic.
Yeah, I don't like, I'm going to tell you why I don't like his videos. And it's completely, see, we hardly edit anything with ours. And his is so edited that it's like a beat when he's talking sometimes. And so I think he would benefit from better scripting. We don't script, but we also just own our mistakes. And he's giving more of a 10-minute lecture. So better scripting on the lecture to where he doesn't have to edit so much. But other than that, no, material wise, there's no complaints at all. It's just the delivery kind of throws me off because it's just hard to listen to. But go on.
Well,
Commie cough.
Yeah, it just started being a cough the last couple of days. Before it was just all body aches and head pressure. Oh, there goes the brain fog. So make sure you have a good one. And by that, we mean someone, kind of just to reiterate the high points that we've mentioned before, someone who asks questions, someone who writes things down, someone who adjusts as needed, someone who listens.
Yeah, you just used the word I was about to interject with. You can tell when someone's a good listener. I think this is almost a prerequisite for training. I try not to deal in absolutes, but with the very rare occasion, and I would say your group X kind of people, they can live in this realm without being a great listener because it's their job to just be in front of you, yelling at you to keep going. But if you're talking on a personal level or a programming level or any where it's fitting the training around your needs and wants while giving you what you need, listening is imperative. And you can tell when someone's a good listener or not, or they're just kind of pretending and then doing what they're going to do anyways. So
I've used my wife as an example before of, I got her sessions with a trainer at a box gym because, she didn't like Coach Husband any more than the kids liked Coach Dad. And there was a sharp contrast between the two. She had the first one she tried, she hated because this was the kind of trainer that was just the push, go. And my wife is a mathlete, not an athlete, never has been. And so she couldn't finish the workout. I mean, she literally nearly passed out.
Oh, I've watched people train and I see what they're doing with their clients. And I'm like, you would never do that on your own. You would never do that to yourself. With the exception of my specialized programs, I do everything I make my clients do.
Yeah.
Because it's just, lived experience actually does matter to some degree, because
Yeah.
you can identify, and then you find the holes. Like a great example of finding the holes is when when I first opened Real Fitness, I had these, I programmed everything and I had a partner, and there would be some workouts where people would be dropping the weights and, flexing their hands and everything. And I'm like, come on, you can do it. You can do it. And my partner just finally looked at me and she said, Sam, not everybody grew up on a farm like you. Their grip's giving out. And my grip gave out when I did your workout. And so you get that perspective where you're like, oh, that was a hole in my game. I need to mix this up where they get a break in their grip, maybe here, here, and here in the workout. So,
and the second trainer was really good at this, and good thing too, because she kind of had to be, because what she liked and what she focused on was women's health, especially pre and perinatal. Okay. And you have to be very mindful and very careful with pregnant women. And so she could tell
got
that
one that's ready to pop right now.
Yep. She could tell, okay, you're having trouble. Let's stop doing that and let's do this instead. And so, move to something where, you're sitting down or laying down so you can still keep moving, but you don't have that pressure imbalance that makes you feel all dizzy and you're going to pass out.
Well, and exactly at what point to have them not laying directly on their back, because it cuts off blood flow to the child, and all of these different points. And if you're uncomfortable with that, don't even touch that arena. Exactly. No matter how much somebody wants you to train. If you find your comfort zones, and I'm speaking to trainers now, I'm about to speak to everybody here in a second.
Yeah.
But, if you're learning to train, find your comfort zones right now and get your clientele within that comfort zone. So you don't have to be the best programmer. You can find other people's programs, or even, pay another trainer to write a program. Sometimes you spend money to make money, right? So find someone who you trust to do that, or find public figures that you've learned to trust over time. And maybe we'll come up with a list of names. I didn't prep that ahead of time, but we could probably do that in an episode.
Well, you brought up Contreras and for the strong curves program that he has, and I've gone back to that multiple times and used it as a template, either for other people or sometimes for myself.
Yeah, Alwyn Cosgrove is another good one. Eric Cressy, we've brought him up before. I didn't really care for his show and go program, but most of his stuff is good. Let's see who else. If you want to get real strong, there's no beating Jim Wendler or Dave Tate. If you want figure stuff, who's good? Oh, what's that?
Who's the husband and wife?
Yeah, from Testosterone Nation.
Oh, from T Nation. Yeah.
The name is slipping my mind. She wrote that excellent article on the women in diet and women in training too. We'll come up with that. It'll pop in my mind at 2:30 in the morning, and
probably
won't be able to go back to sleep. Who else is really good? Well, that's a good start. I mean, we gave you a good variety, because Cosgrove's really great with the circuit weight training. Contreras is a well-balanced program. He's more similar to what I do. The strength guys, Thibodeau can be pretty good. And he's more bodybuilding kind of mindset. And he does separate himself from some of his clients, and he has programs that he puts out for natural lifters versus enhanced lifters. Those are the ones that come to mind. Are you looking for that?
No, I'm looking for something else.
Okay, well, I want to get onto a different concept, though. I figured a good place to start is from the ground. And this is a coaching cue I give. Oh, what are you bringing up?
There's a difference between finding an actual source with a name on it that you can credential, that you can investigate and say, who is this person, versus a stupid meme or a chart or a
Mhm.
picture that you get off of Reddit because you like to do these dumb 30-day challenges. That's what that's. So I want to clarify that when you say there's lots out there, is when you go looking for what's out there, just remember what old Honest Abe said about don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Well, I hate to poop on things completely. So you brought up this 30-day challenge thing. I have used them
Mhm,
with clients because if their main issue was consistency and
mhm.
motivation, sometimes you can get them in a consistent basis by supplying that initial motivation. And so I have used them as a tool. Everything's a tool. It's just some tools you take out of the bag more often than others. It's not one I have to use very often, but I also have mostly just long-term clients. They've already developed the discipline.
Right.
Jim Wendler, before he takes on a client, of course, he's one of the most famous strength coaches in the world, so he can do this kind of thing. Before he takes on a client, he makes them make their bed every day and send him a picture for a week. And when they ask him why, he says, I'm going to ask you to do a lot of things you don't understand. And if you can't do this one simple thing, then you're not going
don't
to be able to
necessarily
be a
want
good
to do
client.
because it's not going to be pleasant.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's not my approach, but it works for him. But he can also just say, see you later, go find another coach that's as good as me. And chances are, if you're looking, chances are you're not, because he's one of the best in the world. So it's whatever your client needs is the thing. And I want to talk about something almost everybody needs, because we all have, where did I put it? Did the dog take it? Shit, I had a prop for this. Damn it. We'll use its buddies because these things come in pair. This has ruined us. Unfortunately, it's necessary. So this disconnects us from the ground. And to some degree, we have to, because we walk on concrete and hardwood floors and things like that every day. We're not out in the savannah walking in the grass as we develop to do. And what I've been finding, and this is for fitness and athleticism, I'm going to speak to both. People are disconnected. They don't know what it is to feel the floor anymore, and to what your feet are supposed to feel like on the floor. And I gave this coaching cue to the trainer I was working with. Walk like you're trying to be quiet. And this does a lot of things. You first of all, you start to walk softer, right? So you're not pounding your joints on the ground. Walk like you're trying to be quiet until it becomes automatic. So that's the way you walk all the time. And the second part is, it's a meditation exercise. So now I am forced to think about how my foot is hitting the floor because I'm trying to make it quiet. And that mind-body connection starts charging those synapses to reconnect your foot to the ground and your mind to your foot. And so that's step number 2. So it has multiple benefits. And once you master that, then if I ask you to spread the floor when you do a squat, well, now you can feel the floor. I can feel my heels on the ground. I can feel the ball of my foot on the ground. I can feel the pressure. And now I can feel that outward pressure that puts a cam up my leg to stabilize my hips. But if I don't teach you to feel the floor and I tell you to spread the floor, you're going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? What the fuck? I don't get it.
The first time I heard the term spread the floor, it made no sense to me.
Mm-hmm. But also being conscious of what part of your foot, and I'm going to get to athleticism now, is on the floor will make you a better athlete. So we just talked about a squat. Now you can feel the floor, you can spread it, you can feel where the pressure is. It should be distributed evenly on your foot when you do a squat. It shouldn't be all rolling back to your heels, and it definitely shouldn't be rolling up on your toes. All right. So now I want to create spring in my foot if I want athleticism. The average muscle contraction takes 0.6 seconds. The average sports action is about 0.2 seconds. So we can't hit the ground, flex our ankle, and then recontract to get back up, or we're going to be way too slow. So we get springy on the ball of our foot, right? You'll be surprised. And I've got several that's this summer. This is my business. The athletes now, they cannot get this concept because they have no concept of what it feels to be like on the floor. And so you see a lot of heel toe action, doing a shuffle, doing a sprint, or doing anything. And it makes you slower. And so the foot contact is where everything begins. And so if you're just wanting to be healthy, the best advice I can give you is start learning to feel the floor. That's step one. If you want to be a great athlete, start learning to feel the floor. Because then when I ask you to do something with a certain foot contact, you can do it because you can feel the floor.
A good example of that was a couple years back where I was down visiting, and you had these two brothers in. I think they were getting ready for to show off for D1 scouts. And you had them doing single leg stuff like lateral jumps and squats. And you had them doing it with like heavy benches so they could feel brotacular. Get that good pump, feel brotacular, but now you got to get over here and make your feet move.
Yeah, part of that's just maximizing time. I'm trying to fit more in an hour, but realistically, if I want to develop an athlete, the first thing I have them do is jump rope. I'm going to get more benefit out of that initial learning how to jump rope correctly than I am going to get from 4 weeks of other stuff, because I'm developing that spring on the floor. Let's do the math, right? So when we talk baseball dimensions on the diamond, someone or some peoples a long time ago found that optimal distance from base to base that you get action from the throw to first while it still gives the runner a chance to get there, right? So the time it takes for the runner to get to first versus the time it takes to throw from the opposite side of the field, someone did the math to make that as exciting as possible. And how often, just watch a baseball game that hopefully somebody gets some hits. Is it just like bang, bang, someone gets the base while the ball's getting to the person on first, right? It happens many, many, many times a game. So if I take 1/100th of a second off every step you take, by the time you get to first, that's 2/10 of a second. 2/10 of a second is you 3 steps off the base before the ball gets there. You just beat yourself by 3 steps just by taking 1/100th of a second off every move you make. And I talked about that flexion and then re-push. If someone's a heel toe runner and I get them just on the ball of their foot, I already made them a better athlete. But if they can't feel the floor, I've had athletes where I said, get on the ball of your foot. They say, I am. And I'm like, no, your whole foot's on the ground. Or even worse, when we do ladder drills, they're jabbing with the toes. You see a lot of toe jabbing when you do small skill stuff. So feel the floor is the first step. If you're a fast break on a basketball, 1/100th of a second off every step, that's the difference between being at the free throw line and the basket at the end of the break. It's that much of a difference to make that little bit of a change. And some athletes just can't get it. They just think going harder is better. We see it in fitness too. Going harder is better. When I'm trying to slow them down, you can't even shuffle with your toes forward. Slow the F down for a second. And they're like, oh, I'm not getting a good sweat. So, I don't give a fuck. I'm here to make you a better athlete. I'm not here to make you sweat. Go stand outside. We live in Houston if you want to sweat. Sorry, that kind of gets on a ranty point for me, but this is the first.
Go join a CrossFit gym and then see how that does for your performance. If you want to sweat, and it really is an old-fashioned idea. I mean, for crying out loud, that's what the tortoise and the hare is all about. That it's kind of the same as the saying of a penny wise pound foolish, sayings like that. That it's the same principle, that you're pushing so hard, but you're never getting it right.
Mhm.
First things first, get it right.
Well, and so let's look at drills, right? So if I'm doing ladder drills are all about, I mean, it's not a sport move, it's learning good movement habits.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have you just run through the ladder 100 times where your feet are all over the place and your body position is wrong, you're just reinforcing bad movement habits, right? So I need to pick the ladder up if I'm a good coach and say, no, we've got to go ahead and just relearn these movement habits till you can do it at a good pace.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, it's about repetition. And that's the whole purpose of the ladder. People pull that ladder out just thinking, oh, quick feet, quick feet.
Yeah. And no, it's quick, correct feet. The quickness will not translate if it's wrong. In fact, you're probably getting a negative result. Which is why when I pull, especially, because my work on with things like ladder drills and those kind of agility drills is usually with younger kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and they're usually pretty klutzy because they don't do anything nowadays. I don't remember who I was hearing ranting about this, pointing out that we've got one of the podcasters I listen to is ranting about how we've got a nice new park in our area with basketball courts and baseball fields, and you never see kids out there. It's always young adults out there playing pickup games. Kids don't play pickup games anymore. It has to be organized, which is ridiculous, because that's where you learn to move, because it is unscripted. And so we're having to script basic movements to teach them how to move unscripted.
Well, it's like all exercise. We're, just like I told my grandfather when he asked what I did in the gym, I said, well, all that hard work you did for so long on the farm, I've got to condense that into an hour, 3 or 4 days a week for people, because they don't do that. We don't have that kind of activity. So when you talk about the repetitive drills for sports, it's the same thing. And you've got to think a little abstractly as well, and convince your athlete to think a little abstractly as well. When I'm doing an icky shuffle, I'm not teaching you to run. I'm teaching you to change your body angles and push off with your lateral hip, versus turning your body to move. If I'm doing, let me think of another, hopscotch, it's not a kid's game. It's about developing a good knee punch while you have a 1 foot landing, so your body gets in this alignment. And so now when you go out and do a sports skill, it automatically goes into alignment because we've done a repetitive motion over and over and over again. So it becomes your automatic.
Well, to the reference I made earlier about what you were having those young men do, those football players, and you were, very, very specific of pause, stop, because they wanted to just go with those, with those laterals. Catch yourself, hold yourself, make sure you're stable, make sure you're aligned, then leap back.
Yeah, and there is the time when I get them to go fast, but only when they develop the proper landing mechanic and the re-push. Because when I stop them, it's because they're turning their hips or their toes are going out, or like we saw in the knee evaluation, where you get that corkscrewed Trendelenburg where the leg leaks behind and their hip is swiveling. It's in the gym and in training, you practice at least mostly perfect, nothing's perfect, at least mostly perfect movement, because if you don't get it mostly perfect in a drill, you will never do it on the field. One of my favorite athletes to watch, maybe I'll bring up a video here, is I think the best linebacker of the 20th century, and that's Bobby Wagner. He's not the biggest linebacker. He's not the strongest linebacker. He's not the fastest linebacker, but he's always in the right position because his hips never leave the play. If you watch his highlight video, I just watched it yesterday. Every play, no matter if he's going back in coverage, if he's hugging the line, if he's blitzing, his hips are always facing the other end zone. He can run that way without ever turning his body really fast. And when you learn skills like that, you take it to the next level, because again, physically, he's not as gifted as probably 75% of the other linebackers in the league, but his movement is perfect, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer one day, I think.
The Cowboys have had a couple of linebackers like that in history. Lucky enough to have those kind of players. Unfortunately, they never put good teams around them. But Dat Nguyen and Sean Lee, every single defensive play.
I played football with Dat Nguyen's little brother, by the way.
you saw that jersey come running in to help clean up the play, no matter where it was on the field, because they had the smarts to see the play develop, and they had the movement ability to get there. So they were always there helping clean up the play, if not taking care of the play themselves.
Or a good example of going from bad to good, and the difference it makes. If for those that follow the Houston Texans, we had Kareem Jackson several years ago, and his first couple years, he was touted as a physical specimen and all of these things coming out of college. But his first couple years, these NFL wide receivers made him look foolish. They called him Maggie because he would trip over his own feet and fall on his face so many times. And the difference was, I guess, between his second and third year, he went to a movement coach, because all of a sudden he was able to run laterally with a receiver without taking his hips off the play. So when you turn your back and you're running with the receiver and they make a double move, you have two choices. You can either turn your back on the play, or excuse me, this way. So we're running this way and they double move me here. You can turn your back on the play, take your eyes off the quarterback to get back with the receiver, or you can try to spin and pivot. And if your hips are turned, your feet are going to cross. And that's what kept happening to him. He kept trying to open back up and follow this receiver. Well, these receivers run a 4-4, 4-3-5. You're not going to be able to swivel your hips fast enough without taking a false step, and then you're a step behind. So he would end up flat on his face every time. But all of a sudden in that third year, you started seeing he would be backpedaling, and then he learned to crossover run, like I talked about with Wagner, where he was able to run that way, but keep his hips facing forward. And then when they double moved him, he just opened his hips the other way, do what we call a drop step. And he was able to keep up without taking a false step. And so these are the small little things that these athletes that are on the bubble, but for some reason, no matter how athletic they are, they seem to not be able to make the play they need to make the play. And all of a sudden, when he started doing that, he hit the Pro Bowl that year. He was all of a sudden a Pro Bowler from one season to the next, because he learned how to run or learned how to move without changing his hips. And that, I mean, that's what I try to get across to these athletes. But when we take it back to the fitness side of the equation, it's just healthy. It's good movement. You can move by pushing with your lateral hip. Your hips can open up without changing your whole body. If you trip on a curb, what's more important, that you can squat 500 pounds or that you can catch your body weight like that? Sports movement. I tripped on a curb and I don't want to get hit by a car. Boom, one leg. Just like that. And I'm back on the curb and I'm not getting hit by a car. So, and I actually came across that in real life. I was driving down I-45 back when it wasn't a parking lot every day. And a truck had pulled over. I guess they had a blowout or something. And I was in the right lane and there were cars to both sides. So I couldn't get out of the right lane. And this guy took a step out, and I guess the step was too big. He couldn't handle his own body weight, and he tumbled out into my lane, and I barely hit the brakes and got behind the car next to me. in time, or else I would have hit somebody. It was that close. And because he couldn't handle his own body weight quickly. And so these are the kind of things, and it all starts from learning the floor and then learning to adjust around the floor. And then it works up the chain. I think that's one of the big problems with modern society is, and this can go back to sports too, is we're so concerned about the things we're doing up here because we can sit while we do so much that we forget about where it all starts. Baseballers get that way too. So to bring it back to athletics, so we're bouncing back and forth, but the concept is that I think part of the point is I think this concept is important for everything. When a baseballer, when a pitcher throws the ball, so much of their sports training is focused on the ball in their hand and that delivery, but the power starts at the floor. If the power didn't start at the floor, then they would float back instead of throw the ball. If we were in a vacuum and you tried to throw a ball, you would go backwards, right? Same with throwing a punch, same with shooting a basketball. Everything starts from the floor. And that's why we got to work our way up from there. And if you can't feel the floor, you're screwed. You could be as physically gifted as anything and still not get there. That was where I wanted to go with that. That was the main thing I took out of that session is we've kind of been disconnected from that. And I think that's a good lesson for a lot of trainers because you will have a lot healthier client base if you start with that. One more thing to add to that. Now that I'm thinking about it, this is a thought is just popping in my head. You know how my pet peeve in training, my biggest one is there people who write articles on don't ever do this exercise, and they describe an improperly done exercise. Walking can be the right prescription or the wrong prescription if they have good movement patterns, right? So it would be something as simple as walking. It would be irresponsible of me to say, go take a 30-minute walk every other day if they have a bad gait pattern.
Yeah, I showed you my shoes the other day. If I go for an evening walk, I have to be very cognizant of how I step, or I'm going to cause more problems than I'm going to cure.
Yeah, and that's why I say the walk softly, because it causes people to think about how they're walking. Now, if I want to say give you the mechanics, I got the book right there. Joint structure and function right there. There's your gait analysis textbook right there. But if you were to take a proper step, and the degree of which is dependent on the person, but your foot should hit the heel, should hit on slightly on the lateral side, the outside edge. And then as you roll the foot forward, it should rotate in to where you're toeing off with the big toe. So now you can take the next step. So you're not just walking softly, but you're making contact on the outside edge of the heel and rotating to where you're pushing off on the inside edge of the forefoot. So that heel to ball of toe starts lateral and then works in. That would be perfect gait pattern. Oh, I know what I promised to include in this one. So you're conscious of it, and this brings in the four levels of motor learning. Okay, so the first level is unconscious incompetence. And this is what you're going to get with most new clients on any movement. They're doing it wrong and they don't know it. Okay, so that's level one. Then level two is conscious incompetence. They keep doing it wrong, but they could feel it and they could see it and they know what they're doing wrong. They they haven't got it down yet. And then there's conscious competence, where you can do it right, but you got to think really hard to do it. You've got to actually be actively thinking about it. And then the last one, which is what we should strive for, is unconscious competence. And that's when it's just what's natural. It would actually take you consciously trying to do it wrong. And that's where we should all try to get, but that takes a long time in the conscious competence realm.
Do you ever do that when you're trying to show someone what they're doing wrong and you have to think about it for a second?
Yes,
here,
yes, all
let
the
me,
time. Here's what
like,
you're doing, and I'm like, got to turn my foot out or whatever.
Yeah.
Then a lot of times I hurt myself doing that. So if I have little nagging injuries in the gym, it's a lot of times because I'm trying to show people the wrong way to do it, and then I'm like, oh damn it, yeah, that was what causes an ACL tear, and now my knee hurts. Things like that. But that's part of being a movement coach, though. I'd say the difficulty level, programming is one of the last things people get down, but being a movement coach takes a long time because you have to practice the movement so much that you can almost not do it wrong, or not do it. Yeah. You have to work to do it wrong, I should say. And that's an important thing with all movements. So we're talking whether I'm doing drills with an athlete or just teaching somebody a squat. If you get it a little wrong in your demonstration, that little thing that you got wrong is going to be their motor pattern from there on out. And I don't know what's wrong with the mind on this, because everything right about it, they still get wrong. If you did it perfect, but if you get one little thing wrong, they follow along just fine. It's really difficult. I mean, it blows my mind that it's like a negativity bias we have. You know, we're more inclined to notice the thing that's off than everything that's right. So you have to be pretty almost perfect in your movements when you're showing something. If you're not, save it. Don't program it yet. You find a substitute that's easier.
Well, I think the place to go from there and what to tease for next time and think about for next time is where the application of this principle can become difficult. And one of the reasons I rant about, the 30-day challenge things is because you need to figure out proper progression, right? And so that's something that just grabbing a 30-day challenge is like, oh, this looks good. Oh, my friends are doing this. Is, well, hold on a second. Does that fit within the scheme of your current level and then where you want to go? Or is this going to be regressive because you're not going to be able to do this?
That's where not all 30-day challenges are equal, right? Because one I kind of like is the plank 30-day challenge, because it starts with a short duration and the 30-day challenge is to work up to a longer one. And so that is a progressive model over the 30 days. But let's see, I don't know which ones you're thinking of.
Well, the ones I see that drive me crazy have no progression. It's do, X number of squats and Y number of push-ups and Z number
the
of
100
sit-ups
push-up a day thing
every day. And I'm like, and that is kind of what we were talking about when you were talking about pulling out the ladder is, okay, well, we were going to do this thing, but you can't. So no, I need to figure out how many steps backwards we have to go to get to where you are so that we can then work our way towards where I want to be.
Yeah. And then you have to say, well, what are the things I have to do to get there? Because sometimes it's a little abstract. Like if they can't, we'll go back to the ladder because we've just been using that example. If they can't do a proper Icky shuffle, so for those that don't know what an Icky shuffle is, it's named after Icky Woods from Cincinnati Bengals in the late 80s, early 90s. And you start on the outside of the ladder and it's 1, 2 in the ladder, 1 out. And then you switch direction. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you have several components to it. And the main one is that change of direction. So you're basically teaching the underlying mechanics of a 1 foot cut. So if I'm running and I push off 1 foot and change direction, that's what you're learning. And one of the mistakes a lot of people make with the whole quick foot thing is you end up with a pattern that is, so if I'm gonna do a cadence, the 2 in with the 1 out is, but the problem is I want that outside step to be as quick as the inside steps, because that push off is the important part. So I actually try to train my athletes where I can't tell when their push is if I'm not watching, because I want to hear. First of all, when you get in that other first pattern, they're basically just not even putting any power into the ground in the middle steps. And the second is they're showing me a weakness in their hip that they can't change direction, change their body's momentum at the same speed. So if I get and they can't seem to get the cadence down, then I've got to pull the ladder away and start just working on the cut, which is maybe even going back to abstractly doing some lateral squats, because maybe they don't have the strength, putting a band around their knees and putting them on all fours and having them do a fire hydrant. So that's why it can become abstract. We're looking at a ladder drill where I'm having them run through, but I've got to pull them back to an exercise on their knees, hands and knees, with a band around it, lifting up, because their hips just aren't strong enough to make that cut.
Yep. Well, let's get more into that next time, about some different examples of how to evaluate progression and then adjust to it.
Okay. And let me just add one last thing, and this might kind of segue us into social topics, but it's a mental thing. So we got that meditative effect. We've got just proper walking technique with thinking about walking softly. But the last one is it puts your mind in the moment. And where I've had trouble with clients in the gym, including 2 injuries that I have on my thankfully very short list of injuries, is their mind wasn't where they're at. One of them, she knew what I was, she knew where my mind was better than she knew where her mind was when she fell, because she fell off a box. 2 injuries in my gym were people clipping their heel on a box, doing just a standard old step up and falling backwards, because they weren't aware of where their feet were at that moment. And the first words out of her mouth was, "It's not your fault, Sam. I was thinking of my grocery list." And this has been a progressive kind of argument of ours. Is like, get off your grocery. I could when she would be doing an exercise, I'm like, stop thinking of your grocery list. Think of the squat you're doing. And so when you do that, you connect your brain to your foot, and all you can think about is setting that foot down softly and then rotating through. So if you're a type A, go type personality, your mind is very rarely on the task at hand. In fact, the task at hand is in the way of you getting to the next one you're thinking of. To poke fun at the trainer I was working with, when she texted me after after she was working on the walking softly, and she goes, "Walking seems like a waste of time when I'm trying to get somewhere." I paraphrase. I don't think that was a direct quote, but it's the general idea. And I'm like, there are other things that waste time, but you can eventually get fast doing it that way, but take a step back, because it's going to be more of a waste of time when 10 years down the road, your knees are achy every time you walk, or something along those lines. So it puts you in the moment. And when you get in the moment, when it comes to physical training, you get a mental training moment or effect of just learning to be present in whatever you're doing. And not only is it going to help you move better, but the same neurotransmitters that are firing when you're out of the moment are the same ones that are firing when you're in constant low grade stress. And so you're going to have actually a total body systemic health effect. You're going to basically de-stress your.
I have started trying to do that. Here's a simple example that you might try is typically when I'm up doing, projects or chores or whatever, I'm watching or listening to podcasts. That's when I'm watching or listening to podcasts. When I'm making dinner, I have stopped doing that. And I just put on some classical music as kind of background noise in my ears, and then just focus on what I'm doing to make dinner.
Yeah,
No other distractions.
There are productive times to have that mind wandering effect when you are thinking of the rest of your day, or you're thinking of your grocery list or whatever. But those times are when you're in a situation where you're 100% proficient in what you're doing.
Or when I'm outside picking blackberries and I've got the commie cough and I don't want to be out there, but I know I need fresh air and sunshine.
Well, the best example is a shower. When you're taking a shower, it's almost refreshing to get lost in thought while you're in the shower. So, but I mean, there's very little cognitive necessity to wash your body. Soap up, rinse off, soap up, rinse off, get lost in the warmth of the water.
Think about your favorite little rascal.
Yeah. Now, once you've taken that, not to use a pun, taken that step to get great at walking, now you can kind of, now that it's natural, that's a great time to get lost in thought. That's why I like to walk outside, because I get into nature and get lost in thought. But if you're in that section where you have to, that part of your life where you have to think about walking, well, it's not the time yet. But I would say it's the best place to start, because what just more natural thing in our life than getting up and walking?
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to move on to other things?
Yep. We've been pounding that dead horse for a while now.
Well, one of the effects you get from slowing down to get better at these skills is you kind of chill out a little bit more. When you're in the moment, you're a little bit more chill. And again, de-stressed. And couldn't we all benefit from a systemic chill out effect from everything that's going on in our world, in our culture, in our society? If everybody just kind of took a step back and breathed. You asked me about something that I didn't have an answer to last time we talked culture stuff, and that was a concept called ADE with COVID vaccination. Well, it's a concept with all vaccinations, and so I had to do a little research, and we'll bring it up. First of all, we'll define it. ADE is antibody dependent enhancement. So we've already gone over the systemic effects of having a vaccine. Is it tricks your body into seeing the disease, and you develop antibodies and hopefully long-term B cell, T cell memory for it. Where ADE comes in is not what originally you thought it was and what I thought it was from the way you described it. So when you've had a vaccine or an illness, actually, where you would develop natural immunity, when you see that same thing again, and you don't have a complete immunity to it, so something that's seasonal like the flu or has slight variants and things like that, the three effects, according to this article, which is pretty solid: mild illness, a breakthrough illness where you get sick again, and you can have it pretty severe, or this ADE effect, which to stay specifically on the topic, is it creates kind of a Trojan horse effect where the antibodies bind. So what we thought was originally was that because you're constantly making these basically false signals to create antibodies, that when you re-expose to it, your body doesn't make the natural killer cells anymore. But that's not the case. It's actually the antibodies are made, but when they bind, it actually helps the disease get into the cell. So that's a completely different thing, and that would exacerbate a lot of things. That would be very, very, very bad. And it can be caused by disease as well. And we've seen it before. And this is kind of where I want to go with this. It actually doesn't seem to be happening with the COVID vaccines. But the nugget I kind of came across while we're doing it is how they test for this, right? And so these are some examples of where it has happened from previous vaccinations, and they've corrected the problem, but they did it through the trials. They figured it out during the trials. So when we talk about the approvals and the trials, this is something they look for in it. And they brought up another one, the dengue virus, which we've talked about before. And so yes, it's a concept. It's not even very common in respiratory or viruses such as the flu or even previous coronaviruses. So it was something they were going to look for, but it wasn't a big.
I'm gonna tread carefully here, because I don't want to.
We've got to tread carefully, obviously.
But I will suggest for anyone who wants to hear more about this in particular and in general, go find, well, I believe it was posted last Thursday, Dark Horse podcast with Harvey Weinstein interviewing Dr. Malone.
Brett Weinstein.
Brett Weinstein. That's a totally different Weinstein.
Yeah, the one that went to jail.
Totally different. Which magically didn't show up for you, and you had to go find it.
Well, no, because it's on Spotify. I was looking on YouTube, so you have to go to Spotify, which is better for free speech. But
okay, well, there's a ton of witchcraft in there, so I don't know if you listened to the whole thing.
I did
or not,
yeah.
But they referenced a couple of people, one of whom was Geert Vanden Bossche, who has been very outspoken. And as I understand him, and he is an expert in this field, his contention is that the way the data is being presented, shall we say, it's nigh impossible to say on the surface whether or not this is happening. But his analysis, digging into the data, is that you can't help but have this if you do what we're doing, which is continue to vaccinate for a previous strain. So far as I know, all of the vaccines that are currently being given out, at least in the United States, are still the alpha.
Yeah, well, which is where this one becomes interesting, because it's the fact that there's 4 strains of this virus in the world that cause this to be a problem with the specific intervention that was proposed, that they never released to the market because they identified it in the trials. And this is where I wanted to go with this, is when you click on their own links, they give you a nice description on how this stuff happens. And this is probably written pre where we're at inside in the oh no, it was written 2019, so pretty dang close. Oh, Paul Offit, he's been demonized lately because of his, even though he is Paul Offit is on the FDA medical board, scientific board, whatever they call it, and he again, I'm thinking because I'm treading carefully on how I say it, because obviously a lot of people haven't heard his name because his voice hasn't been present on certain platforms. But he is someone who originally approved the medical interventions that have come out, but when asked about children, he started bringing up age stratification and things along those lines that we've had stuff removed for. And so he's still, I mean, he obviously is not, he is not an anti whatever. He approved it, except when they started just kept pushing things forward, he's like, whoa, we'll pump the brakes for a second.
Yeah.
But he wrote a nice little article on probably why he wanted to pump the brakes. And in this one, when they talk about the specific thing we're talking about, which I'll just highlight and everybody can know from there. If you're just listening to it, it's what Heath is currently ailing with, as we talked about earlier in this episode. They make the comment that here we go. So they do make a good point that in other coronaviruses, it's never been a problem, but studies on the intervention in a laboratory with animals or with clinical trials in people have not found evidence of this. That is true, sort of, because now we're looking at timelines. So they bring up phase 3 trials here. Let's go to phase 1. This phase often takes 1 or 2 years to complete. Phase 2. While these can take as little as 2 years, it often takes much longer to complete all of the work necessary for this phase of development. Phase 3. These are the 3 before you get approval, by the way. And this is usually done when the company requests product licensing. And it takes 3 to 4 years to complete. So we got at least 2, and we got 3 to 4 years. So 4 plus 3 is 7. 4 plus 4 is 8. So we've got 7 to 8 to complete phase 1, 2, and 3 studies on these interventions. And they go into the different kinds of it. Anybody can read this. Here's your link up here. I'll try to remember to put in the show notes. I know I promised to do that before and forgot, but and so in this discussion for the original article you sent me was or you had me look up, all of these issues were found in those different phases of trial, so we never had to deal with it. So all your normal interventions that we have when we're children and we take our kids in for their shots, you can be 100% confident because they've gone through all of those steps. In fact, in this one, it says it takes approximately, to get through them all. Now, I must have hit a thing. To get through them all, usually around 20 years. And this is, okay, so what I accidentally clicked on is a list of all the ones that ended up being taken out because of the trials. But we're talking about a minimum of seven years to get through that. Where are we? Year 2? In year 2?
Yeah.
So we are the trial. That's the problem.
Which is why I brought up the Nuremberg Code months ago. It is the entire idea of informed consent, and you do not perform trials and experiments on the public. And yet that's where we're at. And if you think that there's something wrong with that, then you're the problem.
Well, and here's the thing, we can put a disclaimer on that. This may end up being a nothing burger at the end of the day, despite what the good things those people you mentioned earlier have said. But we can't also at the same time make the statement that, oh, trials have said this, because we haven't had the proper trials with the proper timelines. In fact, with the 80,000 pages of documents dumped by the biggest of the companies that have been doing it, after the first 21 days, they went ahead and gave the actual product to the placebo group.
Yes.
21 days.
Yeah, I was going to get into that later because I've been going down a dark rabbit hole of those documents. And that was something that I learned that was just shocking, is that in all of these trials, I think I believe what I heard was the longest any of them went was 53 days. And then the placebo group was given the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no control group anymore. it's all the same, which clutters the data.
It just makes it irrelevant. It's not even cluttered anymore. It's just done.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking long-term protect. So here's my theory, my hypothesis, excuse me. Let me use proper language. My hypothesis on that is someone in the know said, oh my gosh, the effect is waning quickly, which we know now is about 3 to 4 months. Why you keep hearing talk about boosters, because the effect wanes. It goes away over the next 3 to 4 months. They had to go ahead and basically eliminate their placebo group before that 3 to 4 month period. That's one of my hypotheses.
Well, we shared a year ago, I think it was, the huge study that was something like 600,000 military members, and it looked at all of the vaccines. And
we did so good not using the word until that moment.
The shots, what was it?
Interventions.
I think Malone insisted on calling them inoculations. That because they aren't the other word, so we'll call them inoculations. But the J&J one, after 6 months, I believe it was single digit efficacy. Single digit. And the others weren't that much better. And again, this was 600 something thousand individuals.
Now we've got a lot of things that again, you use the word clutter the data. Variants, talking 6 months. Obviously we were on a completely, how many, what are we on, BA 2.1?
I don't remember. I listened to McCullough was on the Steve Day show the other day, and I was listening to him, and he mentioned what it was. The current strain that he's seeing and has tested for and is treating is he said what it was is some Omicron subset, I think is what he called it. So we're still on Omicron, but we're not even on the original Omicron anymore.
Yeah. XE, I've heard so many different things, depending if it's Britain or South Africa or whatever. Although I did see something interesting on outcomes and genetics. Apparently, there is a genetic, let me try to think of the right words to say it. So if you have a genetic profile that is consistent with your ancestors having crossbred with Neanderthals. So people think we came from Neanderthals, but that's not correct. Homo sapiens were alive at the same time as Neanderthals.
They came about later, and then Neanderthals disappeared, and for a long time it was thought they were killed off. And then when genetic testing came along, we realized, I think it's about 10% of the population has Neanderthal DNA in them.
And if you're in that 10%, apparently you're more likely to die from COVID. Which is probably why we've had such great outcomes in countries that seem to have poor healthcare, like Africa, because they never mixed. Certain regions of the world,
compared to Southern Europe, where there was a large Southern and Central Europe, there was a large.
I guess the region where the Neanderthal population was in the German area, and so
Southern France, Northern Italy, and then the German area. Yeah.
So the areas that have almost no Neanderthal crossbreeding is East Asia, which had great COVID numbers, and Africa, which had great COVID numbers, despite having lack of good healthcare. So
This is something else that's interesting to me, but completely anecdotal. And I'm wondering if you've heard anything on this or if you have a hypothesis on why this would be. Do you have any idea why uh, all of my family that have this right now, uh, us evil men are the one who are suffering the most?
it does seem to hit men disproportionately hard. Now,
Mhm.
from a symptom standpoint, now from a long haul standpoint, what we're seeing is women are hit harder.
Hmm.
And so I actually brought this up to my wife the other day because she's a doctor and I wanted her to think about it, but she just laughed at me. But so let's take a totally separate phenomenon. Women live longer than men, right?
Hmm.
But women also have a higher propensity towards autoimmune disease. And I was like, what if women live longer than men just because they have a better immune system, which would actually make you more prone to a hyper aware immune system, which would be autoimmune disease. And so what we see with long haul is it's usually a hyper autoimmune response. And so when we talk about our inoculation, women are disproportionately affected. So men are disproportionately affected by the actual disease. Women, everything else that goes along with it that is associated with an immune response. So those are just my thoughts on it. I'm just observing and reporting at this point because I don't think there's ever been any work done on that. I just know the numbers that yes, men are hit harder by the disease, women are hit harder by the inoculation and the long-term effects of the
Well,
disease.
my thought was something a little simpler is that so we've talked about the spike itself as a problem, and we've referenced Malone and McCullough and others who have talked about this. And if the spike is running amok in your body and men have more muscle mass, then it seems logical to me that they're going to experience more of the body aches, which is, again, anecdotally, me, my son, my dad, that's been our biggest complaint and biggest debilitating factor is it just plain hurts to move,
Well,
especially in my legs, which again, more muscle mass there. I
well,
really
let's
wish I had a hot tub this last week because I've kind of lived in my shower.
you should have visited this week.
Yeah.
But let's look at unrelated things though. Men are more prone to cardiovascular issues,
Hmm.
right? So cardiovascular disease. So I had a writer on an insurance policy I had once that I didn't know it was so. It was the reason why the insurance was so cheap because they weren't going to pay for anything. Because I have congenital heart disease. For those that don't know in the audience, and the writer on my policy was cardiovascular, and they define that as everything the blood touches. So I guess I could have
um,
gone and got a free haircut, but other than that,
um,
things weren't covered. Yeah. So when I had when I had a major surgery that year and I was out $43,000 of my
ow.
own money, that kind of hurt my credit a little bit. But yeah, so men are more prone to cardiovascular disease, hypertension, things along those lines. So what we do know about the spike protein is it does hijack the monocytes that
Hmm.
are present in the bloodstream, and they tend to attach to the blood vessel itself when they're hijacked by the spike protein and cause inflammation. And inflammation obviously is pain everywhere when you have it. So that would be my guess. I'm just speculating at this point based on other information. And, but yeah, I would say when we're looking at a men women difference, that would probably those would probably be, at least in my eyes, the most likely things. Unfortunately, they're not really looking into it.
Nope.
Your frontline doctors are, but good luck finding any information of what they're finding.
Yep. Well, I've got, like I said, I'm going down the dark rabbit hole of um the big P and their documents, and it's interesting. I'll tell you more about it when we're not recording, and then we'll see how much we want to talk about when we're recording.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I don't want to ruin the fitness episode by putting something in that gets the whole thing thrown out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did look into what you had me go, and it seems to be a nothing thing. I think realistically, the big numbers we're seeing now is just because of the waning effect of the certain interventions, and the fact that it is the original strand in the inoculation versus something that's not completely different, but specific to the protein that you're being inoculated with, it is very different.
Well, we'll once again refer you
spike.
to Weinstein and Malone because they go down some interesting conspiratorial rabbit holes. But I love them because they make it absolutely clear when they're speculating. They make it clear when they're postulating based on observable evidence and what that is, and they make it clear when they're certain and why that is. And they are not afraid to say, I was wrong about this. A couple of times during that podcast, I think both of them at one point says, yeah, when we talked last time, I said this and I was wrong because.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that did. There was a little bit of that. And actually I saw something interesting. I like to mix it up when I'm done listening to things about what we're talking about or whatever. And one of my favorite, just kind of all around the place podcasts is Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson. He's a British dude, and he had another guy on, and it was 14 things about your mind or something. And one of them, his guest had, he called it beautiful. What do you call it? Beautiful mess, where people try to be perfect to attract other people. But it's actually when your life's a little bit messy and you're a little bit imperfect and you're open and honest about that, that actually is what brings people in. Whereas if you try to present yourself in a perfect light, it actually pushes people away. Because then it triggers something in the observer's mind that wants to find the flaws. And so let's get back onto the conspiracy theory wagon. It's the presentation of everything is safe and effective, and everything is all these words that everything's perfect. Don't question this. It's perfect. It's exactly what we needed at the right time. And it's no wonder if this happens on just a local level of you meeting somebody, that a whole group of people is going to start thinking this way about something that's on the national level. Society is an extension of the psyche of the people in it, right? So sociology is the mass formation of, I'm not going to finish the other part of that, the mass formation of the psychology of the individuals in that society, right? So if this concept works on a local level, it's going to have an effect on a mass level as well. And so that's probably what fueled this whole misinformation, disinformation, malinformation kind of mentality, because now they've got to put the hammer down to try to put anything away from what
I think the funniest and funnest example of that is Jon Stewart on Colbert. When you still weren't allowed to, point out the logical best guess of, as Jon Stewart put it, it's in the name of the Institute. It's right there, and we're not allowed to talk about it. And of course, Colbert is apoplectic because, he's all about the narrative, not about jokes anymore. And
well, he's about keeping his job.
Exactly.
Is what it is. And so this is actually a concept that I wanted to bring up before, and maybe we can go in more detail next time, because we need to, if we're going to do any Wheel of Time, we need to get on it. But when you police speech, there's all kinds of downstream effects, but one downstream effect that I've been kind of thinking about is, you never know when anybody's being honest. if you make it, if you create a situation, this can happen on the individual level too. This is actually something that a lot of abusive relationships a tactic used is when you make it to where somebody can't say certain things, you don't ever know if they're ever thinking that thing. So if you can't use a derogatory slur because of society, you don't know if that person's thinking the derogatory thoughts. But if society's like, you can say what you want, but we might, you might not just be your friend, right? Then you know who the assholes are. And when you do that, you just eliminate the ability to see who the assholes are.
Well, I think that's why there has been such an explosion in alternative media, because if you can't know necessarily the honesty, but I think people can instinctively pick up on authenticity. So back to that Jon Stewart and Colbert interaction is, you could, whether or not Stewart was right, I don't know, who knows, but
We'll
he's
never
being
know.
off, but he's being authentic. You can tell that in that exchange, that Colbert is being wholly inauthentic and trying to toe a party line, trying to maintain a narrative. And Jon Stewart is just being an authentic person speaking what everybody is thinking. And you get that with the YouTube channels that have done well, is because partly it's because they have a niche and they're interesting or whatever, but there has to be a level of authenticity there. And I think that's where you get some channels that boom and then bust, is they try and hold on to that audience and they lose whatever it was that get the audience there in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to close this part one out. Yeah, when it comes to authenticity, obviously we try to skirt the line that keeps us on air, but we let you know when we're doing that. It's like we're obviously not using certain words. We don't want to get trapped in the algorithm, but we're gonna try to get as close to that edge as we can. And when we say that out loud, I think it allows people to say, well, they probably are further past that edge than they're saying. Yeah, I liked that term, beautiful mess. When you let your vulnerabilities show, it actually adds to the strength of your statements.
Yeah.
And when that's the first thing that popped in my mind when you talked about Malone and Weinstein talking about their mistakes that they came up. And I try to point out my mistakes as we go forward. And if anybody call me out on something that I might have got wrong, and if you're right, I have a standard of evidence. I'm pretty stubborn, but at the same time, if you meet that standard of evidence, I'm also willing to walk that, take that mile of a little bit of shame. So I think that's a good place to close it out, though. So,
All right.
Well, we'll be back with part 2 for those that watch both, and try to get a little bit of wheel of time in for Scott and the other 2 people that watch and never comment.